being able to share. Great. So it looks like we're recording, right? I want to ask if you can place the QR code. Yeah, so Anita, the next time we have a Slido, the QR code will pop up there again. So it will be in 2 slides.
Okay, thank you. I felt like I was missing some stuff because
No, you're totally good. We just did a test just to make sure that it was working. So you're great.
Wonderful. Thank you. I apologize.
Yeah, so, and we are recording, obviously, so those who couldn't be here today, or those of you who want to review it, this again before the 18th. And thank you, Ariane, for reminding me of that. So we went through, we're going to go through pre-meeting objectives, the workshop overview and preview. We'll talk about what I said is collective process mapping, and then what you need to do to prepare for the workshop. And then a Q&A. So let's see, I have to get my cursor in the right place. Okay, so our pre-objective meetings for this pre-meeting, and I just want to clarify, these are not our objectives for the actual workshop or convening, but you know, because when I was doing this, I was like, wait, hold on a second, which is, you know, getting the two confused. So what I want you to take away from this pre-meeting is the understanding, the why behind this convening, why we're doing this, in addition to the what we're doing. I want to preview some key concepts, so when I bring them up on next Thursday, you're not like, I have no idea what she's talking about. So I'm hoping that, you know, we can get some of that newness out of the way. We'll talk about something called empathy mapping. If anybody has done student journey mapping or journey mapping in general, or worked with personas, that's something that might be familiar to you. We'll use that to ground ourselves in the student experience. And then I said, obviously, before I talked about collective process mapping, and we'll also talk about gallery walks or carousel activity. There's many names for it, but I'll go over that. And you may or may not have participated in something like that. Really, the main purpose of this is to prepare you for the in-person convening. And I'm really hopeful that we'll get there. And then to really start to begin that process on reflecting around current practices and challenges that you have in terms of the work that you do with students. So why a convening and why now, right? So let's talk about the purpose of the convening. So different from the objectives of today's meeting. The purpose of the convening, when Lily contacted me and asked me about this, she gave me, you know, she let me know what you all are doing. I did some research, was able to understand what connectors do for the state, and then to kind of think through that as far as this program to be put into, you know, with KCTCS schools. Before we even say this, I would like to say, and this is something that I think Lily mentioned, and I firmly agree. I think that this program is super unique and has the ability to be a leader in the country, not just the state, right? Like, but the country. And I think the ability that is a great and exciting thing to know that you are on the cutting edge or on the leading edge of this kind of work, and that it could impact others in other states. And so that's kind of the big why, right? Like the big why is how, you know, why we do this work and why this is important. But the foster of so if you think about that as this in context of that, the purpose of this convening is to foster collaboration. We want to identify best practices across institution, or even current practices. You might not know if they're best or not, but you know, it might be something you do that somebody else isn't doing, and how, you know, how does that, how can you translate that across campuses? We want to uncover challenges and identify areas for improvement. And then we also want to collect, my favorite one is to capitalize on this collective wisdom and what we say shared creativity. So one of my favorite things to do about facilitating is really bringing together a group of people who have ideas but aren't, and then kind of feed off of one another, and it becomes this kind of balloon of ideas and things that you never even thought would emerge, but that only can happen when you bring, people into a room for a dedicated amount of time and giving them that time and space to think. So the goals of the, in general, we talked about this, I talked about this as a big why, right? Is, everyone here is committed to supporting student success, right? This is why we do the work that we do. We want to obviously address student basic needs. We also want to, this work will hopefully help to improve operational efficiency and effectiveness as a new program. There's kind of growing pains that happen. None of you have a playbook on how this is supposed to work, or you have ideas, you know how to do your job specifically, but what is the kind of overall playbook of how this work goes? And so I think having that kind of roadmap, or those processes documented, and really understanding them, are going to improve operational efficiency. It will also help with turnover or new connectors coming in, right? Like how are they going to know what they're supposed to be doing? If you figured it out already and been like, this is really working. And then also to build a collaborative network. And that's all, a lot about what the collaborative, is in the sense of building there's just a lot of work around bringing people together. You're not reinventing the wheel all the time, really learning from one another and creating this kind of statewide community, as far as communities of practice or whatnot on the work that you do. I think one of the things I thought of is why now, right? Like a lot of you might be thinking, we just started, it's only 6 months. And, for some of you, I know some of you are in place in maybe December, but most of you more like January, some of you maybe later, but it's relatively recent. So like, why are we looking at that now? And there are some really good benefits of looking at things early on, and not waiting until, you've kind of established norms and you're kind of in that work. So we know that early feedback leads to kind of easier change and easier adjustments. As you know, if you've worked somewhere for a long period of time, there's always but that's how we do it. Well, we don't have to like worry as much about that's how we do it, as, I'm sure there are practices across your institutions that people are saying, well, this is not how we do this, or whatnot. So this is new and it's change, and we want to get ahead of that curve, right, of entrenchment. You all are doing this work and you're obviously bought in and committed, but it never hurts to kind of come together and be reminded about why we do this work, and what this program is and how it supports students. As I said, bringing together diverse perspectives to be able to think outside the box, to kind of popcorn ideas, is just really great from an early standpoint of something. Again, because you have diverse perspectives, right? The longer you are in this work, the less kind of diverse your perspectives become, because you tend to do the same thing over and over again, right? Like now it's fresh in your mind and you want to think about, how can I do this better? And then resource optimization, and that goes back to kind of that operational efficiency. We all know that higher education, and especially community colleges, are underfunded and short-staffed, and you have a lot of students and a lot of needs. And so how can we work smarter, not necessarily harder, build, the ability, like create capacity, while also being able to serve more students. So that's kind of the why. And I think it's really important for all of you to understand why we're doing this. I definitely like to know the why around why I go to something all day. If I'm going to commit my entire day to something, I definitely want to know why I'm doing it. Not because somebody told me to. So Anita, there's your QR code, as well as slido.com. So this is another word cloud. And I just want you to start thinking about what are some of the challenges that you face in supporting the students on your campus. I would say limit it to 1 or 2 words, just so that we don't have full sentences. And we'll see. So it should pop up once people start. I'll give you a few minutes to collect your thoughts and and share. Mm. A lot of good ones. I'm assuming the virtual one means that a lot of students are online. And I don't know who said that. So like if they're online, then they're not obviously coming and you're on campus, so you're place-based and that's a disconnect between it. Low amount of foot traffic. Online learning. Well, others are typing. Does anyone want who wrote online learning or virtual want to maybe talk a little bit about how they experience that or what that challenge looks like for them? No pressure. Yeah. Did I hear somebody?
So,
Oh, Joy.
so I put it on there. Just the lack of students in your traffic area is, so we could come up with a really good online learning tool. You know, there's a lot of students in the KCTCS that are online.
Yeah.
So we have found that as connectors.
Yeah. And so so I was saying you're place-based, right? Like you're on the campuses, but the students
Yes.
aren't.
Right.
Right. And so how do you
Yep.
reach them? How do you connect with them? Follow up with them? Yeah,
Right.
that's great.
How do we get them?
How do you get
You
them?
know?
Yeah.
You know, get their attention that we are there to help.
Yeah. This is awesome. So a lot around kind of awareness, and that's obvious. It's a new program, right? Like, so how do you let people know that you even exist to even help them? So it looks like most of you have responded. And so I appreciate you doing that and to share these things. This is really helpful for me as I come in to work with you to really know what are some of those priority points that we want to focus on. So, okay, so we're going to move on. And if you didn't and you want to add more, please feel free to, because I'm going to take this data and use it. Oh, sorry, went back too far. Okay, so let's talk about what to expect on July 18th. We talked about the why we're coming together, but what are we doing and what should you expect? One, I want to talk about the approach, and this is very much my approach, but also kind of just the nature of us meeting for a short period of time together. So I do my best to make sure that the work, like what I prepare for all of you and the environment that I create for you to work in is engaging, collaborative, insightful, productive, and definitely not boring. I have sat through way too many workshops in which I'm just like, why did I waste a day? And I spend countless hours thinking about how not to create that for you. And I think Lily can probably say that that is something I try to accomplish and hopefully do most of the times. So so I'm excited to create an environment for you that you're happy to be in and that you're excited about. It will be quick, fast-paced or quick-paced. We don't have that much time together, hence why we're doing this meeting. And we will be just moving quickly. My apologies if people feel lost. I want you to know that if that does happen, that is a raise your hand and say, we need to slow down. And that is completely fine. If I have to adjust our agenda to be able to make sure people are present, that is, we will take care of that. I sent an email, or Ariane sent thank you, Ariane, sent an email from me to all of you earlier, before the July 4th break. It talks a little bit about me and my approach. I really try to create a very inclusive environment. That means I think a lot about how people learn and how people think. I have a neurodivergent child who is a much more slow thinker and one who's a much quicker thinker, right? And so as a parent, I've had to learn to adjust my own communication style for that. And when I started to do this kind of work, I realized that I have a room full of people who are quick learners or slower learners or thinkers, introverts and extroverts. And I want to make sure that you all feel that you have a place in that room. So to do that, there's many different things that I do throughout the day to hopefully to create that. I will reiterate, and something I put in my my email to you is, if you have a mobility challenge or any kind of disability or need any kind of accommodation in order to participate fully, I do want you to just send me an email, or you can private chat me here, or however. I want to make sure that we are able to create an environment in which you can fully participate. In addition, we will be using what I'm calling modified, but it's a 1-to-many method. You might not know what it's called and you might have done it before, but it's this idea that you have individual thinking time. You come together as like a group of 2 or 3 to be able to talk about something, and then many meaning either a small group or a large group. But that gives everyone a chance to be able to really contribute, and we will follow that. I will say it's a modified version because the worksheet that you all received really is your one, right? The way that we had to do this in order to like get everything in within the hours we have was to do the kind of one work, the individual thinking through that worksheet. And I'll talk more about that as we go on. And as I said, it's not boring. There'll be big sheets of paper everywhere and a lot of Post-it notes. And if I can fit it in my suitcase, I'll bring Play-Doh and a bunch of other toys. That is always fun to work on, and especially those of you who might be fidgety or need that. I know I am. So activities, as I said, we'll do a carousel activity, otherwise known as a gallery walk. We'll talk about we'll do an empathy map, and then we'll spend most of our time on collective process mapping, and I'll go over those next. The workshop agenda is very much a draft, but this is going to give you an idea of the flow of the day that we'll have. So yeah, I mean, that's a draft, and so don't hold me to being exactly this on exactly those times. Lily and Ari and I are meeting on Friday to kind of finalize some things, and this meeting itself and the feedback from this will help me to determine what direction we go in. But generally, that's what we'll be doing. So, workshop activities. By a show of hands, how many of you have participated in what we call a gallery walk or a carousel activity? Yes, I see Tammy and Anita. Okay, so I'm going to describe it, and then maybe you'll be like, oh, I've done that. I just didn't know what I was doing. So a gallery walk is when you rotate through different stations. So imagine the room, and we'll have flip chart paper, and on each flip chart paper will be a question. We're going to break into how many ever groups there are for how many ever questions, and you will rotate. Each group will have an amount of time at each station, and you'll brainstorm and you will write down ideas, and the next group that comes out will either add to your ideas, +1 them, or add their own. And we will continue doing that until every group has gotten around to all, say, 6 stations. In this case, everyone participates, and you might be thinking, oh, this is hard, like we're just going to jump into this group and we're gonna how am I going to be able to actively participate? Well, there will be no trick questions, and it's not a pop quiz. So the questions that will be on this are going to come directly from the worksheet questions that you have. So if you've done the worksheet, then you've thought about these things. And so there's your one, right? In this kind of activity, because we will work pretty small in small groups, we won't be doing a 2. We'll just go from 1 to many in this case. It's a pretty quick brainstorming activity. It really is a way to kind of get a lot of different data very quickly to be able to see themes. At the end, I'll facilitate us going around. We'll talk about what's surprising, what you learned, what is missing that you thought would be there. And we'll kind of have those conversations to just prime our thinking for the afternoon activity. Then we'll do something called empathy mapping. And a show of hands, has anyone even heard about empathy mapping before? And Lily, you can't raise your hand. Yeah, I didn't think so. So this is a great tool. And I have started using it in pretty much all my work that involves students. So we will use a one-to-many approach, and we will do this one at the workshop because I have not given you any prompts around this. What I do want you to think about, though, are your interactions with your students, those students that you have had interactions with. We are going to document things about them. We are going to put on paper things that we know about that student, not stereotypes. Like, I want you to really take the information from your own experiences, right? So we want to know what the student's thinking, how they're feeling, what they do, and how they and what their needs are, right? And so what you'll get is, we'll kind of create, you could see that there's a map on the right. This is a complete empathy map from the adult learner work that we did. We'll do a more simplified version of this because you'll see there's here's and sees on this one. We won't go into that. We'll just do the thinks, feels, does, and says. And there'll be prompts. I will send out an email after this meeting, and I will send additional links to information about empathy mapping for those of you who might want to learn more. We will spend more time on, I'll give you more instructions on this, but again, it will be prompts to say, of the students you met, like when they come to you, what do they say, right? What do they need? And what do they do, right? And so you're gonna just answer those questions about students that you've interacted with. The reason we do this is to ground ourselves in the student experience, right? So if we need to build processes to support students, then we need to understand what the students want, need, feel, does. So for example, online learning becomes an issue, right? Like, so if the student doesn't come to campus ever, right, then that's a does, right? Like, student doesn't come to campus. Well, then how do we develop processes around or steps or engagement efforts around the fact that a student doesn't come to campus? So we put these on there and we kind of come back to them when we're mapping to be able to make sure that we're meeting the needs of a student. So before I move on to collective process mapping, another little poll for y'all. So you go into Slido, this should be active, and how would you rate your process mapping skills? And there's no right or wrong answer. I'm loving the instant result thing. This is good. Oh, what is this process map? So we have people who have no experience at all, doesn't even know what process mapping is, and someone who has a lot of experience, which is great. I love having a room full of people because you can learn from each other, like with different levels of experience, because you can learn from each other. Plus, it makes my job a lot easier when a few people have done it, because it's hard to facilitate 5 or 6 different groups at a time. So I feel like a lot of, like, almost half of you feel, well, I'd say over half of you kind of between the, I could probably figure it out, I'm decent, or I have mad processing skills. have some familiarity with it, which is really awesome and really good to know. But for those of you who have never heard of it, or we're going to go talk a little bit about process mapping in general, and then specifically, I'm going to kind of go over this collective process mapping approach with you. So, okay, a process map or process mapping. It is in its simplest form a visual representation of a workflow. So we do something, it is like the steps you take to do it. It can be as simple or as complex as possible, you know, as you make them, right? Like I've created process maps for so many different things. We have really complex ones that I can show you from the Adult Learner Project that goes through how an adult learner is onboarded onto an institution. You can only imagine the amount of boxes and decision points that happen during that. And yet I'll show you a process map in a moment that is super simple. So we're going to probably stick more on the simpler side of things, but because of the amount of time we have together. But just know that it is a visual representation. You're going to be using sticky notes and creating this kind of map on a board. It is a way to structure how work is done. I did want to point out that it's interesting because most process maps are either what we call the current state or the future state, right? And that's the idea is that you have a current state and a future state, and then you figure out how to get from one place to the other. What we're going to be doing is something in the middle. It's kind of a hybrid approach. So it's process maps show you either how something is currently working or how you would like it to work in the future. And then it shows the steps of the process, the sequence the steps take place in, decision points, and other key activities. And like I said, they can be as complex or as simple as possible, as you want them to be. So I always like to say, and sometimes, we have the current state, future state, and sometimes we just make it up and take a hybrid approach. What I want to say about that is, and you're like, well, why isn't she following some like really strict approach to process mapping? And I believe personally, and I have followed very strict approaches to process mapping. I find that tailoring any tool to the needs of the group that I'm working with, it has the best possible outcomes. And so over time has really just kind of allowed myself to change and adapt really great tools that for the group that I'm working with. So for all of you, and that's just like my way of personalizing and making sure that you're getting the most productive environment. So this is a really simple process map. If you, I think I had included a link to some training I've done, a video. You would see this. This is just, I use an example of throwing a birthday party or a party. And this is literally just a very simple process map, right? You decide to throw a party. So you're going to choose a theme and have a guest list. And, as you can see, this is just, and this could be linear. It doesn't have, I can't fit it on the page or that'd be so small. So it kind of, it's like a snake, it circles around. But as you can tell, there's just different steps in this process, super simple. But you have a starting point and an ending point, right? You decide to throw the party and then you clean up from the party. And those are the two pieces. And then what happens in between. So we're going to talk very high level. So I'm a context person. If somebody was talking to me and they jumped straight to here's the 3 steps that we're going to do, but didn't tell me kind of the whole process, I'd probably be like, what's the whole process? I kind of want to know. So those of you who don't need to know the whole process, you can, tune out my voice. Those of you who do, I'm just going to go over this really quickly. So there's 5 steps typically in mapping a process. Is really standard. You're going to define the process, right? So what are you mapping? What are your boundaries? So that's that starting point and ending point. And why are you doing it? You're going to collect data. So that can be done through observations, interviews, just literally going about your day and writing down the steps that you take. You map the process. So you get together with a group and create, whether you do it through technology, there's a lot of programs you can use to create it. I actually really simply use PowerPoint for the majority of my process maps. I find some of the other, this Lucid Chart, you can find free things online. I've used anything from very complicated ones to simple. And then you, a step oftentimes skipped is that you review and validate it. So I have found that in the moment, you think you've gotten it all, but when you can kind of step back and and take a few days to, you know, decompress from the work that you did, to look at it again and then realize that you might have missed something. So we definitely do that work, and we will be doing that in this process. I will send out the maps that we create together to you all, just to make sure that we haven't really missed any big things. And then finally, why are you doing this? Like, you're doing this to obviously improve something. So the final step being the improvement of these things. However, we are going to be focusing on 3, right? At the workshop. The kind of review and validation will happen after, asynchronously. So we're going to focus, and of these 3, we're going to focus on 3 things in particular. We are going to focus on defining boundaries of the process. We are going to gather data, and then we're going to create the maps. And so if we think about these 3 things, here's how they kind of fit into the workshop. So defining the boundaries in the process, understanding where you start and where you end, that will be a collective conversation, like that will be a discussion, right? And we might come up with a few starting and endings, right? Like maybe one group wants to map out the point of when a student comes to your office to when they're enrolled. Maybe other groups want to do from the point of, like, either a student self-identifies or you find that student, right? Like, so the kind of ending, I think the ending point is probably the same for everybody. We just need to talk about what that beginning point is. Like, what's the best place to start? Like, how far out? And we'll have that conversation and kind of set, if, you know, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 starting points. And then we'll create the maps on site. So that also will happen. They gather the relevant data information, and this is, again, I'm going to say it so many times, is your pre-convening worksheet that was sent out. And this is why it is so important that you complete that work. Because that information is going to feed, like, it's what's going to be used to develop these maps. It's what you have to bring to the table when you all come together. Sorry, I'm going to take I hate, like, I talk, it's a lot of talking. And I hate the sound of my voice, so I feel bad for you all. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about what I'm calling collective process mapping. And it is the core activity. It is what this entire workshop is built around. It is not, like I said, it's not traditional or standard in any way. You can't go Google it, or maybe you can and tell me that I'm, like, using somebody else's idea. That's fine. It's unique, and it really is designed to kind of capitalize or harness what is in the collective knowledge and experience that's in the room. So it's going to incorporate both current or best practices. We can call them either one. They could be either one. It's going to allow for the addition of innovative ideas. So that's your future focused, like how you want it to look. And it's also going to allow us to identify common challenges. And so for anybody who's done journey mapping, it's kind of this hybrid-ish between the two, some similarities. So of a process map and a journey map. I think it will, the hope is that it will encourage outside the box thinking and also foster cross-institution collaboration and learning. So when Lily asked me to do this work, you know, it was like, how are we going to process something when you all come from different, how are we going to map something that you all come from different institutions? Generally, you're doing the same thing, but there's going to be steps that are different, right? So this is where this comes from, right? Is how do we make sure that we can create something together and it be valuable while it not being one person's process, right? Like it's not being one singular process, but kind of the collective whole, what you will. So I'll show you an example of what I mean. So I created this is super basic, and I know that this is not any way saying that the work you do is this simple, because I know it's not. But in the most basic sense, I started by saying, okay, like student identification, and that could mean a student either self-identifies or you identify a student, or they come to you or sign up at a tabling. Then you have your initial contact, maybe. So that's like actual, like in-person, one-on-one meeting with them. You do a needs assessment. Again, just an example. I don't know if this is how you do it. And then an application and enrollment. And so what we're going to do is use different color sticky notes to be able to identify different things. And this is going to really help us visually to see kind of the current or best process practices and the challenges, and then the innovative new ideas. So in this case, it's green and gray and kind of red. I think I ordered like neon colors, so it won't be these. But we'll set that at the meeting. So I'm just gonna like quickly kind of go over my thought process through this and how it kind of works so you can understand. So for student identification, I just thought of like how can a student possibly kind of identify as someone who needs your services or needs your help? And I would like to say is that I did one example, right? Like I expect there to be a lot of current and best practices, right? Like there is not only one way to identify a student. This is just one example. So for me, I said that the student goes to the food pantry, sees a flyer about Connect services, and adds their name to a list to get more information about SNAP. I don't know if that's something that happened. I think Lily might have mentioned it to me, so maybe it is. Just kind of was in my head, or maybe Ariane did, but somehow that's what popped in my head last night. So when I think about that, I think a pain point, and interesting because a lot of you mentioned online learning, which is how will online students who never go to a food pantry know about Connect services? So obviously that is a problem or a challenge, a pain point. And then from an innovative or new idea, I didn't come up with one, but I just put a question. But so this is kind of how you would think about it, which is how else can students be identified or self-identified? Innovative ideas you would do last, right? Because you would give everyone in your group the ability to put down those current or best practices first. And then because there might be your innovative idea might be something somebody's already doing. So we do that and then kind of brainstorm together to think other ways. And that's your out of the box thinking. And so I did that with student identification. I did it with initial contact, and then a needs assessment. And so you can kind of see this is a really simple version, but I'm hoping it gives you a better idea of the kind of mapping and what we're going to be doing. So we're almost done with, okay. So another Slido, I think we have maybe one more after this, but what part of the workshop are you most looking forward to after I've kind of run through this very quick version of what to expect? Oh, and I think you can pick 3, like your top 3. Now I feel like I have to come up with a really good icebreaker. And no, it will not involve Oreos. I have this icebreaker that involves Oreos, but it's mostly for small groups. I think I have one in mind. Anybody still? Oh, we got more. Lunch. I'm glad nobody picked the part when it was over. Well, this is really great to know that for me to know that people are really interested in about hearing about other people's experiences, because that really is how the collective process mapping is. It's built around that, right? It's built around this idea that you are all going to come together. You have different processes, you have different steps that you're using. How do to share those, and then to think, oh, I could do that, or I'm not doing that, or why am I not doing that, right? So I'm really hoping that this space that we create really allows for that. And I'll make sure that I take these pieces, not the icebreaker one, I mean, it's kind of cheeky and funny, but into, I think, into thought when I'm developing some of the, what's the word I'm looking, scripts around the work I do. So I think I just have, okay. So really quickly, preparing for the workshop, like when you leave this meeting and you, between now and the 18th, I'm not going to ask how many people have completed the worksheet. We can talk about it. But that is, I will say, the best way to prepare for this meeting is to spend time with that worksheet and complete it as fully as possible. So preparing for the workshop, here's just some things that I think would be helpful to review the current processes you go through. So it's really hard to think about the steps that you take because you just take them, right? But to just carve out maybe 10 minutes or whatever to really go through and just write down every step that you possibly take. And it is like kind of I do this and then I do this, literally, and then I do this and then I do this. It could be as granular as you want it to be or as you can get it. That is probably one of the best ways to prepare for any mapping workshop, is to really understand what you go through. Also, I would ask that you reflect on the challenges. That's why I started with that question, because ultimately we want to address those challenges. We want to make this work easier. Whatever those challenges are, we want to make them less painful. We'll say we sometimes call them pain points, and that's for a reason. Also consider successful strategies. I know that some of you are using technology to reach students or to have them reach you, but some of you aren't, right? And so if the use of technology is successful, if you're seeing success with that, we want to hear about that. Absolutely. And how you're doing it, and what do people need to do in order to adopt that practice. I think it's interesting because most of you all have this, because you're part of a system, you all have the same technology tools for the most part, my understanding. And so you should be able to implement some of the things that other people are doing. Also, innovative ideas. If you have these kind of take a moment to think, I wish that we could do X, or I wish we could do this. It doesn't mean that you can, or that you will. Like I asked Lily and Ariane in one of our meetings, I'm like, can we have this data? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, because it's like student privacy and we get that, but I still ask the question, right? Because it gets you thinking about, okay, well, how else can we capture things? So definitely think about some innovative ideas. They can be as kind of crazy, and even if you think, oh, that's never going to work, still come with those ideas. And then revisit your student interactions, and that's specifically for the empathy mapping. And please, and please, and please complete the pre-workshop worksheet. tongue twisters. That is going to be the best way, for us to move along productively. And I have a last question for you. So I've been doing a lot of talking, and I want it to get to the point where you're asking questions and we're talking ourselves. But first, I want to know, is anything that I shared, do you feel prepared for what we're going to do together on the 18th? And you'll see the kind of crying face is the kind of, wait, what are we doing? I don't understand any of it. You talk too fast kind of thing. And then the all the way on the right with the smiley hearts eyes is the, yeah, I'm ready. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. And you guys won't like hurt my feelings if you put something in the middle, or if you, yeah, just be honest. And that way I can kind of a follow-up email, I might add some information.
Hey, Nicole, while they're completing that,
Yeah.
so on the previous slide, what we're looking at for, how we are doing the worksheet and the processes that they're documenting. So of course, for some of our campus folks, they do several other things, but they have students that they may case manage or that are going to show up to express basic needs, concerns. Would we want them to simply show how they help or manage the process of meeting a student's basic needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So whatever your role is, we want you to think about like what is your steps in the process of getting a student from the kind of identification or whatever point, whether they come to you through. And there is, I understand that there is also a side of this that's administrative, right? And so what are those steps as well? Because they create an administrative burden, right? Like we know that all administrative work creates this kind of burden. You would rather be working with students than obviously, I imagine like answering emails or filing forms. And so we do want to know about that as well. That is still part of the process. And thank you so much, Arian, for pointing that out. Anything you do within this kind of realm of supporting the connector program, of getting students kind of in the pipeline to get or to learn about basic needs, we want that to be captured. Well, yeah, so that's terrific, because if we can remove some of those burdens, that would be great, right? Like if we can find ways to automate things, or if maybe somebody's doing something differently in the back end that you don't know about. Well, this is good. I feel like I've done a decent job. People are generally pleased to know that they feel prepared. So what I am going to do at this point is, and look at that, I said I had about an hour of content, I think, so wasn't too far off. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it would be great to see all of your faces. I'm not sharing anymore, am I? Awesome. Okay, so one of the things, so I just really want to open this up for if you have questions, anything that I talked about regarding the workshop, things you're concerned about. And if you have any, I can bring up, I have the worksheet ready to bring up if you want to go over it. If nobody got the worksheet, if you for some reason can't find it, we'll resend it after the meeting with the recording. So the floor is yours. You can raise a hand, you can unmic, you can put a question in chat as well. Okay, that's as long as I can do awkward silence.